Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Richards, Director for the Muskegon Area District Library, and I'm honored today to be with these two gentlemen to be the moderator today for the Muskegon Rotary and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Our conversation on insights and issues related to systematic racism and systematic racism in the Muskegon area. And today I have with me, Jonathan Wilson, the DTE Energy Regional Manager, Corporate and Government Affairs, and Dr. Dale Nesberry, President of Muskegon Community College, and he's a fellow trombonist. I used to play a long time ago.
Outstanding.
So we look forward to having a great conversation with these two gentlemen concerning systematic racism in Muskegon and how we can deal with it and move through it. And we'll talk about some of the experiences that they have had in their careers and in their life in order to provide some insight and help to our membership. So I'll start today with Dr. Nesberry. He can give his background, and we'll kind of go from there with a question. And I'll start about his doctoral dissertation on research and professional work on the social and economic and racial detriments of police behavior toward their constituents and people in the community. So we'll start with Dr. Nesberry today to kind of give us some background on himself and his doctoral research, because it kind of deals with our subject for today.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Kelly. It's an honor to be here with two outstanding colleagues and fellow Rotarians. First of all, I have to make sure I give them the proper respect. But in terms of my dissertation, I don't know if it's visible over my left shoulder, but there's actually a Boston Police Department arm patch. And like you, Mr. Richards, I was not a sworn street officer, but sworn to serve and protect with the Boston Police Department for a number of years, which led me into the dissertation research that I did at Northeastern University. And the major issue, and I'm very thankful that the focus of this session is on systematic racism. And whatever research that's done, typically we try to focus on one-offs, that this person or that person, this organization or that organization. That's typically not the case with respect to racism. Like any other incident, at least my research indicated that organizations that work to improve themselves as an institution are the organizations that do better. So specifically for police agencies, I focused on a variety of social, economic, political, housing determinants of whatever that issue would be. And with respect to race, that was one of many. But we found that in this case, the Boston Police Department and other departments that focused on how they serve their community and specific communities, it made a major difference in terms of outcomes. So people who are treated with respect, treated well, response time quickly and efficiently, those were the agencies that had fewer issues of discrimination. They had fewer issues of certain parts of town not being responded to, say South Boston was responded to more quickly than Roslindale and Boston, that kind of thing. So we spent time trying to understand how we did business as an agency, and my dissertation research focused on those many factors that we felt would have been important for being able to respond efficiently. So yeah, it's agencies that have more poor policing outcomes are likely those who don't do research, comparing themselves to others, comparing themselves to institutions internally in the state, out of the state, that kind of thing. So hope that gives you a taste.
No, it does. Thank you. We've just had a major situation at our Capitol. And the talk now in the nation, and especially in communities of color, was that the I guess insurrection or the run on the Capitol, it was totally, the response from the police was totally different when the Black Lives Matter was in town. It was, and there's a lot of talk on the people of on networks and in on the radio in urban communities about that different response. What is your take? And we just happen to have three men of color on here today. So what is your take on that different response, and the talk now that's going on in the community and how it relates to your experience in dealing with law enforcement or police? I mean, what do you see in that? I mean, I hope that isn't a loaded question, but what do you guys see in that?
I don't think it's loaded, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, so I could defer to my colleague unless he wants me to respond. I've spoken for about 5 minutes now.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond with just, I guess, a little bit of background clarifying. I grew up in Kalamazoo, and I've for a long time thought that the criminal justice system is unfavorable to communities of color. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, but I went to a predominantly white high school, and so I have friends of every nationality in my inner circle. Many of which were doing some illegal things, back in the day, and I saw firsthand how the police treated us as black students versus the white students. And when there was a criminal case, I saw how some of the white students seemed like they would get a slap on the wrist, whereas some of my brothers would get the book thrown at them and be expelled and locked away and taken away from their families. So when it comes to the things that happen in Washington, I guess in a way I wasn't too surprised. It's telling of where we're at as a nation, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And I'll leave it at that.
No, that's good. That was good. And Dr. Nesbitt, your comments are fantastic. So if you want to say something on this subject, I do have something to say from my background too, but I'm the moderator for you two.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you wouldn't bring it up because your background is rich and helpful.
I have to now.
Yes, sir.
But
the only thing that I'll add to what Jonathan shared, I have the same background growing up as he did. I grew up in a similar area, in Muskegon. Actually, Reese Puffer High School. I grew up in a school that I believe we were 95% white when I graduated. So I saw the difference between how black students were treated and how white students were. And so I never had any intent to do doctoral research on the topic. I was a money guy. I was focusing on tax policy and so forth, and still do. But what I did find is that my research, if you, myself, and there were several other researchers who are all over the country now. Some retired, given the fact that I'm old. I'm 65, so I've been doing this for some time. But we researched how are cases of police investigation resolved. So from the time a call for service to a police agency is made until that case is closed, what happens in that case? And what I found, my colleagues, Jay Meehan, he's at Oakland University now, Clint Pierce is at Northeastern, there are people like John Jay in New York, just all over the place doing the same kind of research. And we found that committing crimes of whatever kind, whether it's, Kelly will appreciate this, whether it's a part 1 or a part 2 crime, a very serious crime, felony or so forth, or a crime that's not so serious, across the spectrum, across racial and various demographic lines, there's no difference. I mean, there's literally no difference, no statistical difference between them. Um, and from the time that the call is made, the response by police takes place, and then there's interaction between the police officer and the person making the call or the incident, whatever it might be. That's when you start seeing disparities. And then when the case is or is not referred to prosecution, there are disparities there. Then whites are treated more well than blacks and African Americans. And then throughout the judicial system, the same takes place. So one of the reasons that there are disparate differences is that lack of training is a certain piece of it, but lack of hiring strong professionals to do the work is the key to me. If you have the capacity to hire good people, you're going to have better outcomes. Now, that's not to say that outcomes are going to be perfect if everyone's well trained. I was in a conversation earlier today, literally, where we had a conversation about what can we do to resolve some of the issues in DC? How can we move forward and so forth? I said, I don't know what we can say. We should forgive and forget and move forward when 150, 60 years ago, let's say 140 years ago, when Jim Crow laws were written, they were written by Congress people and lawyers. They weren't written by wild-eyed people who were attacking the Capitol, such as what occurred recently, the insurrection. They were a symptom of an issue. There were leaders who have them focus on those issues, and direct them to do that, either directly or indirectly. So no, I'm not a person who believes that, let's just train everybody up and then everything will be perfect, because we've tried that multiple times in this country. We got slavery, we got Jim Crow, and now we have people who, if you're a person of color, when you watch that insurrection, most people of color who I've had conversations with, they saw the Confederate flags, they saw the racial insults. That's what they saw. That's what they heard. This wasn't simply let's resolve the issues that we believe were aggrieved by our preferred candidate not winning, and we're not believing it for whatever reason. No, I didn't. I saw that, but I just saw people who were like people who came after me when I was younger, in much the same way. So that's my frank assessment.
Okay. And what I am hearing and what I see, and from some of my peers, and it's privilege. They saw that what took place when the Black Lives Matter marches, protests were taking place, that there was, National Guard, there were police departments from every agency at the Capitol, and with all of the information that we're hearing now that law enforcement, even the Capitol Police had, there was just a minor force there. And so the talk is out in the community, especially in the urban areas, and the people of color, brown and black communities, they're saying that this was a big example of privilege. This showed the country and the world the differences in the United States of America. And it was obvious, and it was for everyone to see. And just to kind of give you a little, example of, I worked for a little while as a police officer in a community that was very well known at a time at the height of the automobile industry as one of the first communities to do community policing. And people came to study it and research it. And it was a big thing. And a lot of the evidence out there, anecdotal and some of the research out there, has shown that community policing is important, and because you're neighbors, The police are your neighbors. They know you. And from my experience of being a police officer, there's a lot of them don't even live in the communities. They don't know the people, don't know how they were raised, don't know the culture, and a lot of that goes into how people are being treated. Uh, uh, and from my experience, being in that car, riding with officers of different ethnic backgrounds and races, you see that people rely on stereotypes and they police on stereotypes, and that has a big impact in how people provide that policing service in communities. I saw it firsthand, and it's true, and it happens. It's one thing that I always notice, even within the police community. There are different police organizations. You got the National Organization of Blacks in Law Enforcement. Well, that came about for a reason. They didn't just decide to just have it. They came about because of how they were treated themselves. So there is a difference, and that was a difference. So let's move on to something else. I've got a question here for you, um, in regards to your experience and Jonathan, and with restaurants, and you've got some background in that. And why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, and what is the, how is that a difference, in how people are being treated?
Yeah, so research has shown that restaurants, from the front end to the back end of the restaurant, start white and get black. By that I mean you have predominantly white servers and people in the front end of the restaurant with the customers, and then as you move towards the back, towards the kitchen, the bus boys and things in the back end. That's where you see the more so the African Americans and other people of color working. So I sent that over to you because I just wanted to set the stage, because I experience different service being treated to different service when I go to certain restaurants. Then I know that my white brethren have experience, and I know this because I'm in an interracial marriage, and it's funny. My wife actually is the one that points it out more so than even I do. I'm quick to give people the benefit of the doubt, but she's really quick to say, "Hey, whoa, that's not right." So I mean everything from first of all, not expecting that we're a couple, giving my wife the check at the end of the day, of the meal, to just being very short, and taking forever with our, with our meals and things like that. So it was just, it's just another industry where I've noticed some discrepancy and biasness towards people of color.
Okay. You know, um, and I think we all can probably add to this. Is racism individual acts? Is it systematic construct? Is it both, or neither? Is racism an individual act? Go ahead, Dr.
I think
Desvant.
it's both, but what happens in our society, we typically try to focus on individual acts of racism. And like Jonathan, I'm in an interracial marriage as well, and so I could not have said that any better. But I would also say that um, as a nation, we have run away from the issue of systematic racism or systematic anything. I think there's sort of an anti-intellectual strain that's been with our country for the longest time. And I'm not saying that highly educated people are the only ones who can do well, because I gave you the example of how lawyers wrote Jim Crow. So you've got to keep that in mind. But what I will say is that this country, we're considered to be the greatest democracy in the history of the world by some. Most of the world believes that we became a democracy in the mid-1960s. My dad couldn't vote in Tennessee after having fought in World War II. or been served in World War II. He couldn't fight because of discrimination in the Army. Moved to Michigan and made a home for himself, but couldn't vote in his home state because of that. And once we moved over that hill, then the rest of the world saw us as a true democracy. Well, we had democratic components, but that's my world. I grew up in that world. I was 10 years old when those laws passed. I remember that. So for people when say that to me that we're the greatest democracy in the world, I said, well, we've done okay in some areas, but it gets my attention.
Yeah, we've progressed a lot. I became a police officer, and you know what? My dad, growing up here, wanted to be a state police officer, and he couldn't be.
Right.
That's what his goal was to be. He wanted to be a state officer, and he couldn't be one, and didn't have the opportunity. Couldn't do it. And right here, I was able to grow up and become a police officer here in Michigan. So we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. And we can talk about, there's a lot more we could talk about that we haven't even gotten into. I think we probably dealt with 3 questions. And you guys are awesome. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate it.